Life follows your voice because words are the primary force that shapes outcomes in the visible world. Before anything changes outwardly, something is spoken inwardly and then released through the mouth. Many people think life is governed by chance, background, or timing, but life is governed by law, and one of the greatest laws is that words give direction to existence. What you consistently say becomes what you eventually see. This is not poetry or exaggeration. It is a spiritual principle that works whether a person believes it or not. Every day, people are sowing with their mouths. Some sow faith, others sow doubt, and many don't realize they are planting anything at all. But words are seeds. They enter the heart, take root in the mind, and grow into actions, attitudes, and results. When someone continually speaks weakness, failure, or limitation, those words begin to build an inner picture. That picture then governs decisions, expectations, and reactions. Over time, life aligns with that picture because the voice has been setting the course. Your mouth is the delivery system of your heart. Whatever dominates your inner belief system will eventually find expression through speech. That is why casual negative talk is never casual. Saying, "I can't, I'm stuck," or "this never works for me," may feel harmless, but those words are giving instructions. Life listens. Circumstances listen. Even your body listens. Repeated words become accepted truth on the inside, and once accepted, they begin to operate as boundaries you rarely attempt to cross. Faith operates the same way, but in the opposite direction. Faith is not silent agreement, it is spoken confidence. When faith is present, it demands expression. It speaks before there is evidence. It speaks while conditions disagree. That is why spoken faith feels uncomfortable at first. It challenges what the eyes see and what the senses report. But faith was never designed to echo circumstances. It was designed to change them. Many people wait until they feel confident to speak confidently, but confidence comes from speaking, not waiting. Words spoken in faith strengthen the heart of the speaker first. As you say what you believe, belief deepens. As belief deepens, courage rises. As courage rises, action follows. This is why changing your words is often the first visible step toward changing your life. You may not be able to move circumstances immediately, but you can move your mouth immediately. Your voice also determines what you resist and what you allow. When pressure comes, silence often equals surrender. Speaking faith is an act of resistance. It draws a line and declares that what is happening now does not have the final say. This is why fear works so hard to control speech. Fear wants agreement. The moment fear gets verbal agreement, it gains authority in that situation. But when faith answers fear with words, fear loses its grip. Life is constantly responding to the dominant voice you give it. Not the occasional confession, but the consistent one. Not the words you speak once in hope, but the words you repeat in private, under pressure, and over time. Those words become the script your future follows. They shape how you interpret events, how you respond to setbacks, and how far you believe you can go. People often ask why prayer seems ineffective while negative talk seems powerful. The reason is agreement. You may pray words of faith for a few minutes, but then speak words of doubt for the rest of the day. Life responds to the strongest, most consistent signal. When your speech aligns with what you believe, power flows without interruption. When your speech contradicts what you claim to believe, faith is neutralized. Words also set limits. If you keep saying something is impossible, you stop preparing for possibility. If you keep saying change is unlikely, you stop expecting progress. Expectation fuels movement. Movement creates opportunity. Opportunity produces results. All of it can be traced back to what was spoken repeatedly and accepted internally. This is why changing your voice is not about positive thinking or emotional hype. It is about aligning speech with truth and refusing to give language to defeat. When you speak in line with faith, You are not denying reality, you are declaring authority over reality. You are choosing which voice will dominate the situation, the voice of circumstances or the voice of conviction, because whatever voice dominates will eventually determine the direction life takes next. Every time you open your mouth, you are releasing direction. Words are not fillers between moments, they are forces that shape moments. Your mouth is never neutral because speech always carries alignment. It aligns you either with faith or with fear, with progress or with limitation. Many people believe their words are simply reactions to life, but in reality, life is reacting to their words far more than they realize. What you consistently say becomes what you consistently allow. When someone repeatedly speaks defeat, they slowly give permission for defeat to stay, saying this is just how it is. Sounds like acceptance, but it is actually surrender. Those words place a boundary around the future and declare that improvement is no longer expected. Over time, that boundary becomes comfortable, and comfort with limitation is one of the greatest enemies of growth. Words create agreement, and agreement creates authority. When you agree verbally with a condition, you strengthen its hold. This is why complaining feels natural but produces nothing. Complaining reinforces the very thing a person wants to escape. Each complaint is an acknowledgement that the problem is larger than the solution. The more it is spoken, the more it becomes mentally and emotionally established as unchangeable. The mouth reveals what the heart has accepted. People often say they believe for better while constantly verbalizing worse. That contradiction weakens confidence and confuses direction. Faith requires consistency, not perfection, but consistency. The heart moves in the direction the mouth points it. If your words constantly point backward, your inner life will struggle to move forward. Negative words also train the mind. The mind learns patterns from repeated language. When you habitually speak limitation, your mind begins to search for evidence that supports those statements. It filters opportunities out before you even recognize them. On the other hand, when you speak expectation, the mind becomes alert to possibility. It begins to notice openings that were always present but previously ignored. Many people underestimate the cumulative power of small statements. A single sentence spoken once may seem insignificant, but repeated daily, it becomes a belief system. Saying, "I'm always tired, I'm bad with money, or nothing ever works out," may sound like harmless descriptions, but they become identities over time. Identity shapes behavior, and behavior shapes results long term. Outcomes are often the echo of long-term speech. Your words also influence your emotional stamina. Speaking discouragement drains strength. Speaking faith builds endurance. This is why two people can face the same pressure and have completely different levels of resilience. One continually voices hope, the other continually voices frustration. Their circumstances may be similar, but their inner condition is not, because their words are feeding different inner realities. Silence can also be a form of speech. Refusing to speak faith when fear is loud allows fear to dominate the atmosphere. There are moments when saying nothing is not wisdom, but avoidance. Speaking faith does not mean being loud or dramatic. It means being deliberate. It means choosing words that reflect what you believe is possible rather than what currently feels overwhelming. Words also affect relationships and environments. A home shaped by constant negative speech becomes heavy, tense, and discouraging. A workplace filled with hopeless talk loses creativity and initiative. But when language shifts, atmosphere shifts. Encouraging words do more than uplift people emotionally. They unlock cooperation, motivation, and momentum. Life follows the strongest voice it hears most often. If circumstances speak louder than conviction, life will move in the direction of pressure. If faith speaks louder than circumstances, life begins to bend toward expectation. This is not immediate in every case, but it is inevitable over time. Direction always precedes destination. Changing your words requires awareness before it requires effort. You cannot correct what you do not notice. Paying attention to everyday language reveals what direction you've been giving your life. Once awareness comes, choice becomes possible. Each sentence becomes an opportunity to either reinforce the past or authorize the future, because what is spoken repeatedly does not remain a statement, it becomes a path. Life begins to follow your words, do more than describe your situation. They participate in shaping it. When pressure increases, the first thing that tries to escape is speech, because whatever is strongest on the inside will surface through the mouth. This is why moments of difficulty reveal belief more clearly than moments of comfort. Under pressure, the filters drop and the dominant voice is exposed. That voice is either trained by fear or strengthened by faith. Fear always wants to speak first. It rushes to define the situation, predict the outcome, and set limits on expectation. It uses language that sounds reasonable and cautious, but its purpose is control. Fear speaks in absolutes like never, always, and nothing will change. When those words go unchallenged, they begin to establish mental conclusions long before any real outcome has occurred. Once conclusions are accepted, effort declines and resignation sets in. Faith must be intentional because it does not rely on immediate evidence. Faith speaks because it trusts a higher authority than visible conditions. Speaking faith is not ignoring reality. It is choosing which reality has the right to govern. When faith speaks, it interrupts the narrative fear is trying to write. It refuses to let the present moment become a permanent verdict. Many people believe faith is something you feel, but faith is something you exercise, and speech is one of its primary expressions. When you speak faith, you are not trying to convince the situation. You are training your own heart to stay aligned with truth. The heart follows the mouth more often than the mouth follows the heart. This is why saying the right thing, even when it feels unnatural, eventually produces inner strength. Pressure tests consistency. It is easy to speak positively when writhing is calm, but real authority is built when words remain steady under stress. Consistent, faith-filled speech during difficulty creates internal stability. Stability leads to clarity, and clarity leads to wise action. This sequence is often overlooked because people focus only on the final result, not the internal process that produces it. Fear-based language narrows perspective. It makes the problem feel larger and the options feel smaller. Faith-based language expands perspective. It acknowledges challenges without magnifying them beyond proportion. The difference is not denial, but emphasis. What you emphasize through speech becomes what dominates your attention. Attention fuels energy, and energy flows where attention goes. Your voice also determines how long a struggle lasts. Situations that might have been temporary become extended when continually reinforced through negative confession. Repeatedly declaring difficulty keeps the mind focused on endurance rather than resolution. Speaking faith shifts the focus toward movement and expectation. Even when change is gradual, the direction has shifted, and direction matters more than speed. Speaking faith does not mean ignoring pain or pretending strength you do not have. It means refusing to give final authority to weakness. There is a difference between acknowledging a challenge and announcing defeat. One recognizes the need for growth, the other locks the door to it. Faith-filled words leave room for improvement, possibility, and intervention. Your words also affect how others respond to you. People tend to support those who speak with expectation more readily than those who speak with resignation. Hope attracts cooperation. Despair repels it. This is not manipulation, it is influence. The tone of your language signals whether you are moving forward or retreating, and others instinctively respond to that SI. Over time, your voice becomes familiar to your circumstances. Life learns what you will tolerate and what you will resist. What you consistently speak against begins to lose its authority. What you consistently speak in agreement with becomes established. This is why change often begins quietly, not with dramatic shifts, but with steady, intentional speech that refuses to align with defeat. When faith becomes your reflex rather than your reaction, your words begin to shape atmosphere instead of merely responding to it. The environment no longer dictates the language begins to influence the environment. This is how inner leadership develops. Before anyone leads outwardly, they must lead inwardly, and inward leadership is exercised through disciplined speech that aligns with conviction rather than emotion. Many people unknowingly turn temporary challenges into permanent limitations through the way they speak. A situation may have begun as a passing difficulty, but repeated negative confession gives it endurance. Words give longevity to experiences. When someone continually describes a problem as unchangeable, they are not simply reporting, they are reinforcing. Over time, the mind accepts that description as truth, and the will stops pushing for change. Calling a problem permanent reshapes expectation. Expectation determines effort. When effort decreases, results follow in the same direction. This is why hopeless language is so dangerous. It slowly removes the belief that improvement is possible. Once possibility is removed, preparation stops. When preparation stops, opportunity often passes unnoticed. What could have shifted remains the same, not because change was impossible, but because it was never expected. Language has the power to frame experiences. Two people can face identical circumstances and speak about them in completely different ways. One speaks as though the situation is final. The other speaks as though it is transitional. The difference in language reveals the difference in mindset. Transitional language leaves room for growth. Final language closes the door. Once the door is closed verbally, the heart rarely searches for a key. Repeated negative speech builds emotional attachment to struggle. The problem becomes familiar, even identity forming. Statements like, "This is just my life," or "This is how it's always been," tie the person to the condition. Breaking free then feels like losing a part of oneself. This is why some people unconsciously resist change even while desiring it. Their words have bonded them to the struggle. Speaking faith does not deny difficulty, but it refuses to label difficulty as destiny. There is a critical difference between recognizing a season and declaring a sentence. Seasons are meant to change. Sentences are meant to be served. When people speak as though they are serving a sentence, they stop looking for the end of the season. Faith-filled language keeps the awareness that change is possible, even if it is not immediate. Words also influence patience. When a person continually declares that nothing is working, frustration accelerates. Frustration leads to impulsive decisions or complete withdrawal. Both responses often delay progress. Speaking expectation steadies patience. It allows time for growth without surrendering hope. Steady patience keeps effort consistent, and consistency is one of the most underrated factors in long-term success. The way people speak about the past also affects the future. Continually rehearsing past failures keeps them alive emotionally. Words act as memory amplifiers. The more something is spoken, the more vivid it becomes. This can either empower learning or trap someone in regret. Faith-oriented speech reframes the past as instru, satchian, rather than indictment. It acknowledges lessons without reliving defeat. Temporary pain often demands expression, but expression does not require agreement. You can acknowledge pain without announcing permanence. Saying "this is hard" is honest. Saying "this will never change" is prophetic in the wrong direction. One statement describes the present, the other defines the future. Wisdom lies in choosing language that leaves the future open rather than closed. Your words also teach others how to treat your situation. When you speak as though you are trapped, People may sympathize but rarely challenge you. When you speak as though you are moving forward, even slowly, people are more likely to support progress. Language signals readiness. It communicates whether help will be used or wasted. This affects relationships, mentorship, and collaboration. Breaking the habit of permanent language requires deliberate replacement. Silence alone is not enough. Empty space will eventually be filled by familiar patterns. Replacing negative declarations with truth-based expectation rewires thinking over time. At first, it feels unnatural because old habits resist change, but repetition builds comfort, and comfort builds confidence. What you consistently say about your condition becomes what you consistently believe about your future. Belief shapes preparation. Preparation shapes opportunity, and opportunity shapes outcome. Changing the way you speak does not instantly erase challenges, but it removes the chains that language itself may have placed on progress, allowing movement where stagnation once felt. Normal change rarely begins with external adjustments. It begins with internal alignment. And speech is one of the fastest ways to bring that alignment into motion. Many people wait for circumstances to improve before they change how they talk, but the order works in reverse. Language sets the tone for belief. Belief influences behavior, and behavior gradually alters circumstances. When speech remains unchanged, inner patterns remain fixed, even when opportunities appear. Words act as signals to the mind. The mind listens constantly and organizes thoughts around repeated statements. When you consistently speak limitation, the mind organizes itself defensively. It looks for reasons to avoid risk, minimize effort, and protect against disappointment. This creates a life of caution rather than progress. On the other hand, when you speak expectation, the mind organizes itself creatively. It begins to search for solutions, strategies, and alternatives instead of excuses. Changing your words is often uncomfortable because it exposes contradictions between what you have accepted and what you desire. Speaking faith before results appear feels unnatural because the senses are trained to speak only what they observe. But growth always requires moving beyond sensory confirmation. Speech becomes a tool of discipline, not emotion. You are not speaking what you feel, you are speaking what you choose to align with. New language produces new awareness. When you stop verbalizing defeat, you become more aware of opportunities that were previously ignored. This does not mean opportunities suddenly appear. It means your perception changes. Perception governs attention, and attention determines action. Small shifts in action, repeated over time, create significant differences in outcome. All of this begins with the words that direct perception. Words also influence self-respect. The way you talk about yourself internally and externally shapes how you treat your own potential. Consistently speaking poorly about your abilities trains you to expect less from yourself. Expecting less leads to underperformance. Speaking with respect about your capacity, even way. Lee, acknowledging growth areas raises the standard you hold yourself to. Higher standards produce better preparation and stronger follow-through. Many people desire transformation without realizing that transformation demands verbal agreement. Change resists silent approval. It requires active participation, and speech is participation. When you speak in alignment with growth, you signal readiness to move beyond the familiar. The familiar may be uncomfortable, but it feels safe. Changing language breaks that false safety and creates momentum towards something better. Words also affect endurance during delay. Progress often takes longer than expected, and delay tests commitment. Speaking frustration during delay magnifies impatience. Speaking expectation stabilizes focus. Stability keeps efforts steady. Steady effort produces results even when they are not immediately visible. This is why consistent language matters more than emotional bursts of motivation. There is also a connection between speech and responsibility. When you change your words, you take ownership of direction. Instead of saying, "This is happening to me," you begin to say, "This is something I am moving through." That subtle shift changes posture. One posture is passive, the other is active. Active posture invites learning, adjustment, and growth. Your words create a personal atmosphere. That atmosphere affects how you think, feel, and act throughout the day. A negative atmosphere drains energy and focus. A hopeful atmosphere sustains them. Atmosphere does not depend solely on external conditions. It is heavily influenced by internal dialogue. The more intentionally you speak, the more intentionally you live. Replacing old language patterns requires repetition and patience. The first attempts may feel forced or insincere, but consistency builds authenticity. Over time, the new language becomes natura. Because belief begins to align with speech. Once belief and speech agree, momentum accelerates. Decisions become clearer, actions become bolder, and hesitation loses its grip. Change that begins in speech does not remain there. It travels inward, reshaping thought patterns and outward influencing behavior. This is why adjusting language is not superficial. It is foundational. When you change your voice, you change your direction, and when direction changes, the future begins to reorganize itself around that new path. Victory often begins long before any visible breakthrough appears, and it almost always begins with persistence in speech. Many people speak faith briefly, then abandon it when results do not show up quickly. They underestimate the role of time and consistency. Words spoken once may inspire, but words spoken repeatedly establish direction. Life responds more to what is said consistently than to what is said passionately. There is a principle of cultivation involved in speech. Just as seeds require time beneath the surface before growth becomes visible, words require time to work internally before they manifest externally. When people stop speaking faith too early, they interrupt the process. They dig up the seed to check progress and destroy what was beginning to grow. Persistence in speech protects the unseen work that is taking place beneath the surface. Many give up because speaking faith feels ineffective when circumstances remain unchanged. But effectiveness is not measured by immediate appearance. Faith-filled words first change the speaker before they change the situation. They strengthen resolve, clarify purpose, and stabilize emotions. Without that internal strengthening, even sudden external change could not be sustained. What lasts outwardly is built inwardly first. Consistency in speech trains discipline. Discipline creates reliability, and reliability produces trust, even within yourself. When you know you will continue to speak expectation regardless of conditions, you become less emotionally reactive. Emotional stability is a form of strength. It keeps decisions from being driven by frustration or fear. Stable speech produces stable action, and stable action produces dependable results over time. Words spoken over time also redefine normal. What once felt unnatural begins to feel familiar. Speaking growth becomes easier than speaking limitation. Expectation becomes default rather than exception. This shift does not happen overnight, but it does happen inevitably when language is guarded intentionally. Eventually, the idea of speaking defeat feels foreign because it no longer aligns with internal belief. Persistence in speech also guards against discouragement. Discouragement thrives on repetition, but so does faith. Whichever one is repeated more often gains dominance. If discouragement is spoken freely while faith is spoken occasionally, discouragement will always feel stronger. But when faith is given the same repetition, it builds weight. Over time, faith-filled words begin to feel heavier than fearful ones, and that weight influences behavior. There are moments when speaking faith feels like resistance rather than confidence. Those moments are critical. Resistance strengthens conviction. Speaking faith when emotions disagree proves that speech is being governed by belief rather than feeling. This separation is essential for maturity. Mature faith does not wait for emotional permission. It speaks because it has chosen its authority. Your words during waiting seasons matter more than your words during breakthrough seasons. Waiting reveals what you truly believe about timing and trust. Speaking impatience during delay increases pressure and fatigue. Speaking expectation during delay preserves energy. Energy preservation is important because delayed victory still requires strength to receive and manage it when it arrives. Persistence in speech also affects vision. When you continually speak about where you are going rather than where you are stuck, vision remains active. Active vision keeps motivation alive. Motivation fuels preparation. Preparation positions you to respond when opportunity appears. Many miss opportunity not because it never came, but because they stopped preparing after speaking defeat too long. Words spoken repeatedly become internal instructions. They guide choices subconsciously. This is why consistent positive confession often results in better decisions without deliberate effort. The inner compass has been recalibrated. Choices begin to align naturally with spoken direction. Less energy is spent fighting old habits because new language has weakened their influence. People often mistake persistence in speech for stubbornness, but there is a difference. Stubbornness resists learning. Faith-filled persistence remains teachable while staying hopeful. It allows adjustment without surrendering expectation. This balance keeps growth flexible but focused. Flexibility without expectation drifts. Expectation without flexibility breaks. Speech helps maintain that balance. Your future listens most closely to what you say when nothing seems to be changing. Those moments are not wasted, they are formative. Each declaration made in quiet perseverance reinforces alignment. Alignment eventually produces movement. Movement produces momentum. Momentum attracts results. But the foundation remains unseen for a time, supported by words that refuse to change direction even when circumstances remain silent.